Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Community Health and Capital podcast. I've got with us today Marianne Mannello from Play Wales. Hi, Marianne.
Hey there, how are you, Johnny?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast to join us today. So, one of the conversations we've been having, obviously, Marianne, was around the importance of child play, child recreational play, outdoor spaces for children. And I think most people would appreciate kind of the importance of this and why we need to focus on it, particularly in this more digital and technologically focused world. Tell me though about Play Wales, your organisation, and why you think this is so important to public health.
Sure. So Play Wales is the national charity for children's play, and we advocate for the right and need for every child to play, and mindful that the children are children until the age of 18. So we have an interest in play across all of childhood. And for the importance it has to the culture of childhood as well. Children playing together has really supported neighborhoods and the culture of neighborhoods for since we were little and playing. So as a advocacy organization, we promote the importance of play for everybody, that whose impacts on play or whose decisions impact on play. So that's pretty much everybody, really, whether you're a GP practice or planning highways or actually building and maintaining designated places for children's to play. Everything that we do impacts on children's play, whether you welcome balls coming over your fence or puncture them and throw them back. So we all all adults impact children's play somehow.
And I just wondered, Marianne, because I think people must have their own preconceptions around child play. What is the evidence and the data telling us around what's happening with kind of children's playtime and children's play experiences, both in Wales and the rest of the world?
So I think it's really important first to start with kind of the definition of play. And for a lot of us, if it's adults who are listening, the easiest way to do that is to cast our mind back to what we did as children and remember what we were doing, what we were getting up to, who we were with. Um, in Well, globally, we have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is the most signed up to international human rights treaty. Wales has set all its policy making for children has adopted the UNCRC, it's known as, and the right to play and recreation is situated within that convention through Article 31 of the convention. Now, if the committee feels that one of those articles isn't well understood, it issues further guidance from time to time. They're called general comments. And we do have a general comment around Article 31 rights, so play and recreation. And the general comment gives us a really nice definition of play. It gives us a definition of recreation, and then the other rights within Article 31, which are around culture and rest. And it situates leisure as time bound. So leisure time is, when children aren't doing something that somebody else tells them that they have to do. So recreation sits in that in terms of the vast array of structured opportunities that are available to children these days, which they like and enjoy. But play is defined, has a really nice definition, useful definition by the Committee for Children's Rights, which talks about play being a behavior, which has key features of challenge, flexibility, non-productivity. So it's that sort of what if, as if behavior that children do when the conditions are right for play. The conditions that are right for children to play are across three domains. It's a spatial domain, a psychological domain, and a temporal domain. And that translates to everyday language as time, space, and permission. So having enough time to play from the structure of modern day childhood, having good enough space to play as well, free from unnecessary hazards, and psychological, that sort of being allowed to play, and that can be the the presence of tolerant adults is really important. Parents are ultimately, and caregivers are ultimately, the gatekeepers of children's play. But as I mentioned earlier, we all have a role to play in supporting a good attitude, and giving children plenty of permission to play. In terms of modern childhood, there are a range of barriers which are identified as making it harder for children to find opportunities to play, particularly in their neighborhoods. So, when I kind of compelled you to think of your own play memory, I'm guessing it was somewhere outside, it was with children of different ages. One of the features of childhoods gone by, in bygone days, are of having enough time to play as well. So there are several barriers that children have identified to their play. The biggest one is the speed and volume of traffic. The second is that parental fears, which are very often related to traffic, but also fear of not really knowing the people that live nearby. So it's not necessarily a stranger danger sort of phenomenon. Most parents that you talk to understand that the likelihood of a child coming into harm by somebody they don't know is actually very rare. But in newer neighborhoods, for instance, or when we have a transient population, people are moving into new places, they may not know, those little pockets of play, which, if we think back to our memories, of playing, we'll remember bushes and trees. We had a tag post, all of those sorts of things that weren't behind a fence with a sign on it telling us that we can play there. We didn't have a bouncy chicken or swing or a slide where I grew up. So when you're moving into a new space, if you didn't have a culture of growing up there, you don't know those pockets of that where children value and where they play. So those are some of the obvious barriers: the speed and volume of traffic and the way that our neighborhoods have evolved over time. The way that the built environment has been developed is key as well. So while children report, particularly younger children, report liking designated places to play, like places with swings and slides, that they sometimes will be seen as the only place where children can play. So we kind of, the unintended consequence of investing in those sort of spaces means that we're creating these almost play ghettos. And then they're quite prescriptive about who should be playing there and who should be gathering there. So it immediately cuts across that culture of children of different ages rubbing together, learning from one another, playing together. Obviously, the technical advances and the availability of devices impacts on children's play, but it's really important that we keep kind of an open mind about that, because it impacts on all of our lives now. The ways that we are using devices has changed considerably just in the 5 years since the pandemic in terms of the availability of information. At the last sort of research that we undertook with children, in terms of it wasn't specific research around devices, but it kind of came up in focus groups, and the majority of children are reporting that what they're most using devices for are kind of listening to music and looking up stuff. So, I don't know how many encyclopedias when I grew up. My grandmother had, and I loved getting them off the shelf and could happily sit in a room for a day, delving into that for a period of time, not forever. And was probably told at some point to put it down and go out to play. So I think, we need to put things into perspective. Play Wales has last summer produced a film called This Is Why Play Is So Important. It's freely available on the Play Wales website, so play.wales, choir.cymru. And in it, we gather play memories from adults, but also ask children to talk to us about why play is so important. And throughout the children's voices, you are hearing references to I like coming here. If I didn't come here, I would just be on my room on TikTok all day. Or children talking about, it's good to come out to get some fresh air. Otherwise, we would just be in on devices. So kids understand that balance, but they're reliant on us to help them with that. But I think it's really important that we're mindful of all of the barriers in terms of children's play. It's very easy to focus on one, and when it comes to technology, it appears to me that very often the blame for that is placed at children's doors, and that's not really fair. We kind of say, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? We need to look outside. Why are our children, they're not going outside their front doors because of speed and volume of traffic, or communities are deemed to be unsafe. And a lot of our children are living in what are, unsafe environments. There are adults in some communities that are probably whose behavior will impact on parents feeling comfortable letting their children play out, or indeed children feeling comfortable. But we can't blame, we don't blame children for that. So we shouldn't blame them for whatever they're doing on devices. When we undertake we analyse the returns from all local authorities in Wales about children's ability to play out in their neighbourhoods every 3 years as part of statutory play sufficiency work here in Wales. And at the last, they're currently being undertaken now because the next play sufficiency assessments are due to Welsh Government in June of this year. But in the 2022 analysis told us of just under 7,000 children across 15 local authorities in Wales. It was quite a robust sample. Of just under 7,000 children, 72% of children said they enjoyed playing outdoors most days. But the place where that was most likely to happen was their garden or a friend's back garden. Now, there's a few issues with that. The first thing is we need to be mindful that these surveys were taken during COVID times. So the private garden had a new prominence, a new importance in our life, for all of us in our lives. So did the importance of being outside. So I think we need to be mindful of the limitations in terms of researching children as they were just coming out of lockdown, or certainly lockdown would have been a recent memory for them. But that trend of gardens occurred in the 2019 analysis as well. Now, there's a few, again, so those issues, I guess that's okay if you have a garden, or your friend has a back garden, or your grandmother has a back garden. But for many children in Wales, they don't have access to a private garden due to the density of, housing density, where children are finding themselves living at the moment. And from Play Wales's perspective, we want to see children in front of their houses again. We want them to legitimately be using public space in the same way that we did. So, that data for us forms all of our policy calls. We're calling for slower traffic, safer roads, and asking local authorities to consider allowing residents, for instance, to close residential streets, not major bus routes, not A roads, but close residential streets occasionally to allow those, particularly young children living in those houses, to get out in front of their houses and play in a managed way. For children who may not have access to a private garden, there's, we would like to see schools thinking, what they could be doing for that. Could they be making their grounds available for short periods of time every day after school to allow younger children to play and get used to being outside and get used to being with one another. School life changed drastically for young children and parents during the pandemic. Parents report, particularly parents of younger children, not having opportunities to socialize. Is that sort of culture of drop and dash and grab and go, and we weren't encouraged to speak to one another. We were discouraged from speaking with one another, and that just sort of that casual and informal bouncing ideas around, watching children play, disappeared for many of us for a short period of time, but still enough of a time that I think it made a difference. I'm warbling now. I'm awfully sorry,
No,
Johnny.
not at all, man, not at all. It's interesting you mentioned the pandemic a couple of times because obviously there was a huge sense of hope, I suppose, afterwards, and some determination for a period that we would give back what children had lost, I think, during that era. And I think a lot of us were probably quite energized for a period, thinking that we would, build back in a different way, I guess, really. It's not quite happened quite so well. But I just wondered, based on what you just mentioned, I suppose, given that Play Wales has this privileged position that can see the good practice, both in Wales and elsewhere, what have you come across in recent times being some of the real good examples of good practice, perhaps in Wales and elsewhere?
I'll mention that in a minute because I just realized when we were talking is you asked me about kind of the research and what the research is saying, and I didn't answer that. I kind of went down a whole load of a load of cul-de-sacs, and for that I apologize. But linked to your question about good examples is Play Wales has just published a large literature review. It's called Playing and Being Well, and it is a literature review, as I mentioned, of the recent research into children's play, social policy, and practice. And there is a focus on Wales. And that research has reinforced what we already knew about the compelling evidence base in terms of children's play. That children's play encourages children to be physically active, but also has mental influences good mental health as well. It supports socialization. It helps children to feel connected to their neighborhoods. Um, an obvious benefit listeners will be aware of is the links between play and learning, but also playing and brain structure and critical thinking and problem solving, and all of those benefits kind of compound to build resilience. And that when children have the opportunity to play, it immediately boosts their emotion regulation. That's really important for all children to deal with the day-to-day stresses that all children, all of us have day-to-day stresses, and so playing helps children bounce back from that generally. And for children who are living in particular times of uncertainty, that bolster of the play in terms of a preventative factor is documented now in the evidence. The evidence introduces a range of concepts that I won't discuss here because I think it's a podcast on its own. But in a nutshell, it reinforces that when those conditions are right for children, when they have good enough space, they're allowed to play, and they have enough time to play, they're fairly capable, very capable and competent in finding opportunities to play and making the most of their time. So through playing is a really an assets-based approach to being well. And that when children have opportunities to play, they have opportunities to look after the well-being. And for many, I think, parts of the sector concerned with children's well-being, and there is sometimes a deficit-based approach to that, and we will focus on kind of on more outcome, longer term outcomes, instrumental outcomes that I've kind of mentioned already about the benefits of being physically fit and having a reasonable BMI and attaining well at school and being able to sit still in school when children get there. And there's a focus on that. What the research is telling us is, while that is important, it shouldn't be at the immediate intruistic benefits of children's play should not be dismissed. Your average 3-year-old, when they are hanging upside down on the couch or on the bars at the football pitch, if you ask them why they're doing it, their response isn't, oh, so that when I go to nursery in a few years' time, I'll be able to sit still and hold a pencil. That helps with all of that. Then, I don't know, they're pretending to be a monkey or a Spider-Man or a gymnast or being at the hairdressers. That's what I used to do when I was hanging upside down. My sister would wash my hair and I'd be upside down on the couch. So, the your average 5-year-old isn't, they know that playing is important to them. And as I said in our film, particularly older children, tell us why they think playing is important to them. Even our
Mm.
youngest children can have that voice to tell us it's important, but very often it's in the here and now for children of all ages, not just 5-year-olds. It really is in the here and now, and it's about being connected in that moment. In terms of examples of good practice in Wales, there are a couple of local authorities. I mentioned already the play streets, where local authorities um, provide permission through a process, through an application process, but permission for local residents to close their streets to non-residential traffic for short periods of time. Then it gives an immediate boost to helping that if parents don't know their neighbors, neighbors come out. Children remain the responsibility of neighbors. Older residents report liking enjoying seeing children playing right outside their houses. Again, they remember that from their own childhoods or actually from being parents themselves whose children were able to access that space. So there are a couple of local authorities in Wales who are doing that. Our manifesto calls right after COVID were around, you mentioned the the positives, capitalizing on the positives. Our streets were quieter, the communities were more present. We looked after one another. The importance of outdoors was really elevated. Um, and, there were playful interventions for those of us that lived, I think, in communities right across Wales. Suddenly we discovered chalk again, and because we had that long period of nice weather in the very early days of COVID, the chalk stayed around for a while. So it immediately said, we're playing here. I can play here because I've got the stuff and it's right outside and I've got the pavement, I'm allowed. Or we saw in my kind of where I live, and it sounds a bit idyllic, but I don't think that I've seen them in lots of places, kind of painted stones left for children to find, fairy doors, blue rope reappeared and kind of rope swings across streams. And so there was this importance of being outdoors, but also playful interventions. So I think certainly the research at the time, a rapid research into previous lockdown and quarantine situations, indicated that supporting play was probably one of the most important aspects of supporting children to recover from lockdown situations. But just in terms of everyday people, I think the importance of playing became more evident to all of us. One, because children were losing out on the access to play, either through play groups or through schools, seeing their friends in clubs, playgrounds closed. So the importance of playing elevated incredibly. So I think our manifesto calls are around a real focus on that is better use of community assets. So streets, safer streets, children being able to play right outside their front doors, better use of school grounds, particularly in those under-resourced communities where space might be at a premium, both in terms of private gardens, but also maybe in terms of not having a designated space for play. Um, the importance of adults who support play, so play work provision, trained adults who understand the role of facilitating opportunities to play. Again, supportive adults were really elevated during COVID times, and we saw great examples across Wales of play work teams who may have had to close their projects for in the very early days of COVID, kind of repurpose themselves. We saw examples of people putting together packs and delivering them to children. We saw some online activity to keep in touch with children. There's some lovely examples of a local play project taking out some of its den making equipment and saying, right, it's over there. Because once children were able to, our younger children were able to socialize again. So the guidance changed. So it was just thinking about those playful interventions, playful walks. One local authority introduced playful walks. Another local authority introduced some chalking stuff. Yeah, so just another local authority, when parks opened again, playgrounds opened again, they looked at interventions in the wider parks. So if we think of those city parks, for instance, town parks that have a designated play area, but also a lot of public space as well, is introducing interventions in those other spaces to help with crowd control in playgrounds. Because when they opened again, everybody, it was a big hurrah. I remember it at the time for both parents and, again, younger children, but actually kind of giving permission to play in those fringe bits as well. So saying you don't have to play just here. We've got pavement here. You can scoot on this pavement, or look, there's bushes over there. Those are fun places to hide and play fairies or dragons or dinosaurs. So I think certainly there's lots of examples of good good things capitalizing on the more positive bits of the pandemic. Um, I'm making that sound very idyllic. It wasn't a golden road for everybody though, as well. And for some families, really, really struggled. The inequities around access to space and access to feeling safe in neighborhoods was really highlighted during COVID. And so we really need to pay attention to all children's access. And I think very often it is in those areas where thinking about community assets can better serve children and better support them to make opportunities to play. But we are seeing through the play sufficiency duties here in Wales, there are a lot of neighbourhood-based interventions. We have examples of on our website around play sufficiency of storage containers in public spaces that have loose parts, stuff for playing, so den making equipment and chalk and hula hoops that local community members can open up, can unlock, and let children use open space again. So thinking beyond the park and playground. And as important, as I said, as important as those are, but thinking about promoting opportunities to play in lots of areas, and thinking about fun things to do, community play boxes, as I said. So lots of examples on the Play Wales website. We're gathering those in all the time.
Fascinating. And I suppose just pivoting to, there are so many different public services that are focused on young people, that are focused on children. And I'm sure we all appreciate that collaboration can be tricky, but what would you like to see, or what could we see if early years and children's services across organizations in a local area, if they were to respond to, your very impassioned call for play to become more of a priority, what do you think these services and staff could be doing?
Well, I think you mentioned collaboration. I mentioned play sufficiency duties, and I focused on the duties are on local authorities. So the duty is to undertake a play sufficiency assessment every 3 years, and then to secure, where reasonable and practicable, opportunities to play. And that they do that through an annual action plan and then report on that annually as well. So although it's a 3-year cycle of an in-depth assessment, play sufficiency is an ongoing process. It's not an end product. And the wording of when I said secure is really important, because it's the duty is not on a local authority to provide, to be the only service provider. And through that play sufficiency assessment, local authorities look at across the policy areas, and things, key partners are identified in that. So although the duty doesn't at the moment extend to health boards or town and community councils or um, uh, other groups like that, there is a requirement on local authorities to report how they have worked in partnership, how they have worked in collaboration. And I think for me, regardless of whether there is a play service or not in a local area, there's a role for all of us to be play champions. And I talked a little bit earlier about those instrumental benefits. So I understand that health visitors are very interested in particular milestones, developmental milestones for our youngest children. That's really, really important. I'm certainly not going to say that that isn't important, but they can immediately champion children's right to play to parents and caregivers and provide little examples of what to do for babies and toddlers in those very early days. For instance, GPs could, when when they're concerned about children's health, just gently say, how often are they playing out? Are there problems with them playing out? And when parents say, yeah, there's nowhere for them to play, if you know the community well, say, well, what about that little bit of land over there? And when a parent says, I don't know who owns that, you can say, I do. It's so and so, and that's a place to play. Kids have always played there. It's just, it doesn't have a bouncy chicken on it, but that doesn't mean you can't go there to play. So I think thinking about what power we have to champion play, our ultimate goal as professionals maybe those more instrumental developmental outcomes, and that's okay and that's important. But actually, in the here and now, we are in a very privileged position to be able to stand up for play and to advocate for it. And we have a website called Playful Childhoods, which is aimed at parents and caregivers and communities. And so it's a really good starting point for, people who are working in, whose primary function isn't to support play. There's a whole sector of professional play workers who have a very important role to play and facilitate children's play. And that's really, really important. But the domain of protecting play doesn't sit with that profession alone. We all can do something, every day. If, you know, if you're a GP, promote the importance of playing as much as you're promoting the importance of going to perhaps a sports club or, anybody in healthcare. If you're a neighbor, just throw the ball back. Yeah, just throw the ball back or, you know, admire the chalking. It won't be there forever. It's, if you hear scooting past your front door, just remember it's an important part of being for children in the here and now. The focus has to shift to being well in the here and now rather than becoming something else.
And it's interesting, man. I think it's been really intriguing both to hear the challenging, I think, of a number of assumptions when it comes to child play. I think the fact that something that really struck for me was when you said, when you speak to children, this is what they're asking for and they're calling for. And I don't doubt that we probably don't do that enough, perhaps, really, because we don't tend to do it with the public in general, never mind going and
Mm.
speaking to children themselves, really. But also that a lot of the approaches that you've described don't necessarily cost much, if anything. It just requires, I think, probably a little bit of creativity on the part of adults as well as encouraging it in children. Um, we'll make sure to promote the resources you've talked about in the podcast today, and thank you so much for coming on this. I'm sure this will be a lot of food for thought for a lot of listeners and also a lot of local partners as we try to think, how do we really build those impactful collaboratives between services that work in the early years. Folks, this has been another episode of the Community Health and Capital podcast. Thank you so much, Marianne, for coming in and joining this episode again.
Thank you, Johnny. I've enjoyed it.
And if anybody's got any feedback, any comments, or any suggestions for future episodes, feel free to give us an email on info or podcasts@19hills.org. Thanks, everybody.